Welcome to the deep dive. If you're like us, you're trying to connect the global dots, understanding not just what happened, but why it matters and where it might lead. Today, we're focused entirely on the most critical developments across the African continent, from January 9th right through to the 15th, 2026.
And this week was an extraordinary study in contrast. If we had to distill a single idea from the sources, it would be this.
Really?
African development is currently in a high-stakes race. It's a race between the acceleration of, homegrown structural execution in trade, finance, and technology,
Right.
and the acute volatility being introduced by geopolitics, external pressures, and these intensifying internal crises.
That structural tension is palpable across the entire continent. We've synthesized a massive stack of sources covering everything from, historic contentious elections to deadly climate disasters, all happening in parallel with the a quiet maturation of Africa's tech ecosystem.
Absolutely. The sources confirm that the dominant threads are, first, political friction, especially around elections and managing external security narratives, and second, this profound shift in African innovation.
Shift out.
It's moving from that speculative hype phase to durable, profitable, scalable execution. And that's particularly visible in East Africa.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission here is to provide you, the learner, with the most critical nuggets of knowledge from this very complex period. We'll begin where the internal crisis was most acute, in East Africa, focusing on an election that really challenged the very concept of democratic longevity.
The central focus this week was undoubtedly Uganda. The general election was held on January 15th.
And this was not just a routine poll, right?
Not at all. It centered on President Yoweri Museveni, who has held power since 1986. That makes him one of the world's longest-serving leaders.
And he was seeking, what, a seventh term?
A seventh presidential term. It's almost unprecedented.
To put that in perspective for you, Museveni has been in power for nearly 40 years. He was initially elected on a promise of restoring democracy and rule of law after years of dictatorship.
Right.
But critics point to constitutional amendments, like the 2005 removal of term limits and the 2017 removal of the age limit, as evidence that he's, gradually dismantled those safeguards to just perpetuate his own rule.
Precisely. And his main challenger was Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, who everyone knows as Bobi Wine.
The musician.
The pop star turned politician running under the National Unity Platform, or NUP. He mobilized massive youth support on a platform of anti-corruption and democracy.
And there were other candidates too, right?
Yes, a field of 8 in total, including figures like Mugisha Muntu and Ndala Mafabi. But the real contest was between Museveni and Wine.
The scale of this thing was just enormous. Over 21 million registered voters.
21,681,491 to be exact. A massive political exercise.
And the atmosphere leading up to the election, it sounds like it was less about campaigning and more about outright repression.
It was extremely fraught. Amnesty International called the lead-up a brutal campaign of repression, aimed specifically at the opposition NUP.
Wow.
The sources are just filled with reports detailing the use of tear gas, pepper spray, and physical beatings against NUP supporters at the rallies. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights even accused the government of employing lawfare.
Lawfare. That's a potent term. For you, the learner, how would you define that in this context?
Well, in short, it's the strategic use of legal systems and military regulations to disable or restrict political opposition, rather than just outright banning them.
So it's not a direct arrest for political reasons.
Exactly. Instead of arresting Bobi Wine on, purely political grounds, they used public order management laws, military court procedures, and these vague regulations on public gatherings to cripple his ability to organize and communicate.
It weaponizes bureaucracy.
Perfectly put. It weaponizes bureaucracy to achieve political ends, all while maintaining this veneer of legality.
That aggressive posture set the stage for one of the most contentious elements of the election week, the digital disruption.
Yes. On January 13th, just 48 hours before polls opened, the Uganda Communications Commission ordered a complete suspension of mobile internet services.
And the official reason?
The stated justification was concern over misinformation and fraud, which is a pretty common pretext for these actions globally.
But the opposition saw it very differently.
Oh, absolutely. Bobi Wine immediately accused the government of a strategic move, claiming the blackout was intended to provide operational cover for ballot stuffing, intimidating voters, and facilitating the untraceable arrests of his party officials and poll monitors.
So the internet shutdown became an instrument of political operation, not just censorship.
Exactly.
And the chaos didn't stop there. What about the actual conduct of the election on the 15th?
Widespread operational failures. Polling was delayed by up to 4 hours in countless constituencies.
4 hours.
Up to 4 hours. The Electoral Commission cited generic technical glitches, pointing specifically to failures of the biometric ID kits.
The very things meant to ensure integrity.
The very things. So polling officers had to revert to using paper registration records just to prevent total disenfranchisement. The scheduled 4:00 p.m. closing time had to be extended by an hour, which just fueled more suspicion.
That points to severe systemic failure, whether intentional or not. But the most alarming detail in the sources was the public acknowledgement of pressure coming from the head of the electoral body itself.
It's an extraordinary admission that just fundamentally compromises the entire process. Simon Mugeni Byabakama, the chair of the Electoral Commission, publicly disclosed that he had received direct warnings from unnamed senior government figures.
Warnings to do what?
Warnings urging him not to declare certain opposition candidates as winners. He tried to project impartiality, stating that only the law and the voters would decide. But the very fact that he felt compelled to publicly state he was being threatened by the government, well, it just underscores the immense anti-democratic pressure being exerted from within.
That's a critical insight. It moves the story from anecdotal reports of violence to evidence of institutional breakdown at the very top. Okay, let's pivot from that internal electoral drama to international strategic maneuvering. Somalia has redefined its foreign security posture this week.
They have, by fundamentally terminating all security and defense agreements with the United Arab Emirates.
And this isn't just a minor diplomatic spat, is it?
No, this is a high-stakes move on the geopolitical chessboard of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
So what did the move entail?
The termination, announced by the Council of Ministers, explicitly bans UAE military and cargo aircraft from using Somali airspace. Somalia justified it as necessary to protect its unity and territorial integrity, directly accusing the UAE of violating its sovereignty.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back? What triggered this?
The immediate catalyst was suspicion around the unauthorized movement of a key separatist leader, Idris al-Zubaydi, who leads Yemen's Southern Transitional Council.
Okay.
The suspicion is that the UAE enabled him to travel from Aden through Somaliland, which Mogadishu considers part of its sovereign territory, to the capital, Mogadishu, and then on to Abu Dhabi.
All without authorization.
All without authorization from the federal government of Somalia. Mogadishu saw that as the UAE actively undermining their authority.
The deeper grievance, though, relates to the UAE's historical strategy of engaging with, fragmented local authorities, bypassing the central government.
Exactly. This is the core issue. The UAE has pursued massive infrastructure investments, most notably a long-term lease for the strategic Berbera port in Somaliland.
And Mogadishu sees this as
the UAE actively supporting Somaliland's push for independence, deepening fragmentation in exchange for exclusive commercial and strategic access.
So if they are cutting ties with the UAE, which regional power is Somalia pivoting toward?
The counter-pivot is directly to Saudi Arabia. Somalia is actively seeking Riyadh's direct support to counter UAE influence.
How actively?
So actively that Somalia's defense minister publicly appealed for Saudi Arabia to intervene militarily against Somaliland's secessionist ambitions.
That raises significant questions. What does Somalia offer Saudi Arabia that makes military intervention and deeper engagement worth the risk?
Well, for Saudi Arabia, it's primarily about maritime security in the Gulf of Aden and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
A critical choke point.
Vital for global trade and energy. A unified Somalia, including Somaliland, strengthens its control over that area, which is crucial for monitoring threats, especially from the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, just across the water.
But this strategic realignment introduces a major new instability factor, particularly concerning non-state actors like al-Shabaab.
The risk is enormous. Any major foreign military presence, especially one linked to Saudi Arabia, provides immediate propaganda material for al-Shabaab.
The rallying cry for recruitment.
A powerful one. Plus, sources note al-Shabaab has already been strengthening ties with Yemen's Houthis, sharing intelligence, coordinating assaults, smuggling arms.
So if Saudi Arabia moves in,
al-Shabaab and the Houthis could see it as an extension of the Yemen conflict into Somalia, leading to a unified regional backlash. It's a move intended to consolidate state integrity that carries the very real risk of empowering insurgents through blowback.
Right. Moving south now, we see volatility manifesting not through geopolitics, but through climate shock. Northern South Africa is grappling with severe, deadly flooding.
This is a classic example of climate volatility just overwhelming local infrastructure. The impact was concentrated in the Mpumalanga and Limpopo provinces, home to the iconic Kruger National Park.
And there's a human cost.
A significant one.
Oh,
Since the heavy rains began in December, at least 19 deaths have been reported. The severity was confirmed by the planned visit of President Cyril Ramaphosa to the affected areas.
what was the scale of the immediate weather threat?
The South African Weather Service issued a red level 10 alert. That is the highest warning level possible,
Wow.
forecasting another 100 to 200 millimeters of rain over the next 24 to 48 hours. Major rivers, the Crocodile, the Sabi, the massive Limpopo, were already overflowing their banks.
And how did this impact the Kruger National Park, a huge economic driver for the region?
Kruger had to take drastic action. They suspended all-day visits, closed several entrances. One of the main camps had to be completely evacuated by helicopter.
And the animals?
A park spokesperson noted that the animals are generally adaptable and move to higher ground, but the human infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the lodges, was severely impacted.
The economic cost must be substantial.
It will be. And the immediate governmental response was to deploy the South African National Defense Force. Their helicopters were crucial in rescuing stranded people.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it?
It is a reminder of Africa's chronic vulnerability to climate shocks, a vulnerability that often just overrides any political or economic progress.
Let's shift now to West Africa, where Nigeria provides one of the most interesting political and diplomatic stories of the week.
Yes, and it revolves around the relationship between domestic security failures and the management of international perception.
What's fascinating here is the sheer cost of trying to control an external narrative.
It is. The federal government of Nigeria signed a colossal $9 million contract with the U.S. lobbying firm DCI Group. This isn't for security hardware, it's for high-level public relations.
$9 million. For what, precisely?
The stated purpose is twofold. First, to assist the Nigerian government in communicating its actions to protect Nigerian Christian communities, and second, to maintain critical U.S. counterterrorism support.
So this is a direct diplomatic counteroffensive.
It is. It aims to reverse the political damage from the Trump administration, which had redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern over alleged targeted attacks on Christians. Nigeria is trying to tell Washington the violence is non-sectarian banditry, not religious persecution.
So they're essentially purchasing a new, more favorable diplomatic narrative. But this sparked fierce internal critique, didn't it?
Absolutely. The domestic backlash was immediate. Critics argue that spending $9 million on lobbyists in the U.S. is an appalling misallocation of resources.
That money should be spent on security at home.
Exactly. On funding local forces, purchasing equipment, improving intelligence. They see the contract as a tacit admission that the government can't control the domestic insecurity narrative and has to, outsource its defense to foreign PR consultants.
That critique is heavily reinforced by the continuation of localized violence elsewhere in the region.
Tragically so. The crisis in Cameroon's English-speaking Northwest region continues. In the village of Gidado, at least 15 people, including 8 children, were killed by armed men.
And this attack targeted herders, Ro.
Mboro herders. It just highlights the complex, multi-sided nature of the conflict, which has already displaced over 600,000 people. These tragedies continue even as governments spend millions trying to control international perceptions.
On a more positive note for the region, we did see Ghana showing some strong economic signals.
Yes, Ghana provided a significant economic counterpoint. Its consumer inflation slowed to 5.4% year-on-year in December.
And that's part of a trend.
It's the 12th consecutive monthly decline. This consistent disinflation is crucial. It strengthens the case for lower local funding costs and boosts investment confidence.
Okay, moving to North Africa, we encounter another seismic geopolitical shift, this one reconfiguring the regional security architecture. A formal military pact between Morocco and Israel.
This has vaulted over mere diplomatic normalization and become a core strategic partnership. On January 2nd, a high-level Moroccan delegation signed the 2026 Military Action Plan in Tel Aviv.
So what does that mean in practice?
It institutionalizes long-term cooperation joint industrial projects, integrated strategic planning, and sustained military dialogue. It definitively positions Israel as Morocco's most vital security and tech ally on the continent.
Why is Morocco pursuing this alliance with such urgency? I mean, it seems framed by an existential security threat, specifically involving Algeria.
It is entirely framed by regional rivalry, and Rabat believes the alliance was strategically justified by recent intelligence. Morocco has long warned of an emerging Iran-Hezbollah Polisario axis,
Right.
and their fears were recently vindicated by an intelligence breakthrough in Syria.
Tell us about this Syrian smoking gun.
Well, after political shifts in Syria, the new leadership there rejected requests from Algiers to release hundreds of detainees.
And these detainees included.
A senior Algerian brigadier general and about 500 soldiers from the Algerian army and Polisario militias. They were captured while fighting in support of pro-Iranian forces.
Wow.
And during investigations, these fighters allegedly admitted to receiving training, logistics, and arms from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah. Rabat views this as definitive, irrefutable proof.
Which accelerates Morocco's embrace of a new defense philosophy.
Exactly. We see Morocco adopting what sources are calling a smart power defense strategy. They're allocating $17.1 billion toward qualitative modernization, focusing on a domestic defense industry through joint ventures, for instance, with Israeli firms like Bluebird Aerosystems.
So tech over numbers.
Tech over raw numbers. It's a contrast with Algeria, which continues to pour a massive $25 billion, 20.6% of its budget, into conventional hardware.
This deepening security relationship clearly has implications well beyond North Africa.
Absolutely. The U.S. is paying extremely close attention. A senior FBI delegation just completed a field study focused on Morocco's African Security Cooperation Center in Saleh.
And what's the takeaway?
The FBI views the center and the data sharing mechanisms developed with Israel as a functional blueprint for effective global security governance. It positions Morocco as a crucial transatlantic partner.
And tying this back to the theme of domestic stability, Morocco also intervened in its trade flows this week.
Yes, the food security intervention. Morocco announced it would halt exports of frozen sardines effective February 1st.
And the reason for that?
It's an intervention intended entirely to protect domestic supply and contain rapidly rising prices. It just illustrates how the need for domestic stability, especially controlling food inflation, can quickly supersede trade predictability.
Let's turn to the health crises the continent is simultaneously grappling with. It is sobering to see the sheer scope of infectious disease threats, starting with Marburg in Ethiopia.
The MVD outbreak, confirmed back in November, has thankfully shown signs of stabilization. As of January 5th, there have been no additional confirmed cases or deaths since December 19th.
So containment efforts may be succeeding.
It suggests they are.
What are the final figures reported for this outbreak?
The toll stands at 17 total cases, 14 confirmed, 3 probable, resulting in 12 deaths. That's a case fatality rate among confirmed cases of 64.3%.
That is just a chillingly high number.
It is, but 5 cases have recovered and no one is currently undergoing treatment.
And what's the current response strategy?
It's intensifying community monitoring and robust contact tracing. But crucially, Ethiopia has begun a vaccine trial using 2,500 doses of the Cat3 Marburg vaccine.
And they're offering that to whom?
Specifically to frontline healthcare workers and known contacts of confirmed cases. And because the epicenter is close to the borders of South Sudan and Kenya, those nations have significantly intensified their own preparedness efforts.
The scale of the cholera outbreaks, however, just dwarfs this localized Marburg crisis.
It's a massive multi-country crisis. Globally, in 2025, cholera caused over 600,000 cases and more than 7,600 deaths.
And in Africa.
It remains devastating. Zooming in on the period between late November and late December, the Democratic Republic of the Congo was the hotspot, reporting the most new cases and deaths globally.
Which other African nations were severely impacted during that period?
The list is extensive. Angola, Burundi, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, South Sudan, Zambia, and Zimbabwe all reported new cases. It just highlights the urgent cross-border challenge of waterborne diseases.
And finally, a reminder of the threat posed by seasonal plague in Madagascar.
Yes, plague is endemic there, with cases spiking between September and April. On January 9th, a fatal case of pneumonic plague was reported in Ambositra district. Authorities immediately implemented stringent control measures.
It's just the constant simultaneous vigilance required against all of these different threats must be incredibly straining on public health resources.
It strains them to the breaking point.
Let's shift gears to the structural engine of Africa's self-determination, the African Continental Free Trade Area, or ACFTA. The latest forum indicates a necessary pivot from, Well, from ambition to execution.
That is the essential takeaway from the second AfCFTA business forum in America.
Yeah.
The urgency is rooted in shifting global trade dynamics, the rise of protectionism, rising tariffs in key export markets.
So the consensus is that the AfCFTA needs to be operational now.
Now, before those external markets become too volatile to rely on.
What were the specific priorities laid out by the Secretary General Wamkela?
He emphasized 4 critical action points. First, the rapid elimination of intra-African trade barriers. Second, modernizing customs systems. Third, liberalizing the movement of people and services. And fourth, fully leveraging the massive $712 billion digital economy opportunity.
And Morocco seems to be positioning itself as a strategic node in this next phase.
They are crucial. Morocco was highlighted for its advanced manufacturing, its leadership in renewable energy, and critically, its strong public commitment to adopting the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, or PAPSS.
Let's focus on PAPSS for a moment. We hear the name often, but for you, the learner, what is the functional importance of Morocco adopting this system?
It's a game changer because it addresses the single biggest friction point in intra-African trade: the reliance on foreign currencies and banking systems.
Right.
Currently, if a Ghanaian company wants to buy from a Nigerian company, that transaction usually has to be routed through US dollars or euros via banks in London or New York. It's costly and slow.
So PAPS lets you do what?
It allows the Ghanaian company to pay in Ghanaian cedi and the Nigerian company to receive naira instantly and securely. Morocco's commitment is a major signal because it brings significant volume and credibility to the system.
The forum also dedicated time to the practical mechanics of trade, focusing on the rules of origin.
The technical work is where integration really happens. Discussions focused heavily on finalizing the rules of origin for key sectors like textiles and automotive.
Which basically determines what qualifies as made in Africa.
Exactly. It's essential to prevent simple transshipment and ensure countries invest in genuine industrialization.
And the forum also emphasized inclusivity.
Yes. The Secretariat convened a masterclass, making the AfCFTA a reality, focused on capacity building for youth entrepreneurs and smaller trading companies. It reflects the belief that the AfCFTA can't just be for large state entities.
Okay, looking at the macro picture, the World Bank provided an outlook for sub-Saharan Africa's growth. What are the key projections?
The World Bank projects that sub-Saharan Africa growth will firm up, hitting 4.3% in 2026 and accelerating to 4.7% in 2027.
Driven by what?
Primarily by stronger investment in exports. However, the caveat is substantial. This forecast relies on 2 major assumptions: a stable external economic environment and critically significant and sustained improvements in security in conflict-affected regions.
So those growth rates could be downgraded if volatility increases.
Easily.
Which economic heavyweights are leading this charge?
We're seeing stabilization. South Africa's growth is projected to rise to 1.3%, driven largely by more reliable electricity supply and a bumper harvest.
Nigeria.
Nigeria's growth edged up to 4.2%, supported by expansion in services like finance and ICT. Ethiopia's growth, while still formidable, eased slightly to 7.2%.
Despite these positive internal drivers, there's a looming external threat tied to U.S. trade policy.
The most immediate concrete risk is the scheduled expiration of the U.S. African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGO, in late 2025.
AGO provides that preferential, duty-free access to the U.S. market.
It does. And its expiration poses an enormous downside risk for heavily reliant exporters like Kenya, Lesotho, Madagascar, South Africa, whose apparel sectors in particular depend on it.
Finally, what did S&P Global Ratings identify as the single most critical structural constraint on Africa's potential growth?
S&P's analysis confirmed that African economies have the potential to achieve mid-single-digit growth. But the binding constraint, the single factor holding them back, is financing bottlenecks.
So it's not a lack of projects, but a lack of capital.
Exactly. Thin domestic capital markets, cripplingly high debt service burdens, and a lack of credible regulation to attract local currency funding. Resolving these issues is the prerequisite for durable growth.
Let's discuss 2 specific policy moves aimed at boosting industrial self-sufficiency, starting with South Africa's unique approach to its power crisis.
South Africa took an unconventional approach by temporarily loosening antitrust constraints for energy-intensive firms, smelters, refineries, heavy processors,
So they can cooperate on energy projects.
and negotiate jointly for supply. The rationale is purely protective. These industries have been severely undercut by unreliable and high electricity costs. It's an emergency measure to protect jobs and the tax base.
And in Ethiopia, we saw a key sign of retail formalization with the entry of Carrefour.
This is a significant indicator of market maturation. Carrefour is entering Ethiopia via a franchise partnership.
And the impact of a major international retailer like that is
Profound. It doesn't just offer new goods. It pulls in modern procurement standards, crucial cold chain discipline, high supplier compliance. It forces local competitors to upgrade, and for the state, it helps scale tax capture and drives investment in logistics.
great. This is where the concept of structural execution really shines brightest, isn't it?
It is. The sources show a clear, definitive shift in the African tech ecosystem. We are moving past the early stage of, speculative hype growth at any cost to a phase of deep execution.
Making sustainable models, infrastructure, B2B services, and demonstrating profitability. That pivot from hype to infrastructure is the critical insight for you, the learner. Let's deep dive into the Kenyan ecosystem, which seems to be leading this charge.
We can organize these breakthroughs around the theme of de-risking and infrastructure building.
Let's start with InsurTech and FinTech infrastructure, services that de-risk the African consumer's life.
Turaco is a prime example. They've moved beyond being just a small InsurTech bet to operating as a continental insurance infrastructure company.
And their model is embedded microinsurance.
Exactly. Coverage is bundled directly into everyday payments, mobile money, loans, utility bills. It radically lowers the friction of insurance uptake. They've covered over 5 million people, and crucially, Turaco achieved operational break-even in Kenya, Uganda, and Ghana.
So their expansion is funded by revenue, not just speculative capital.
Which is a huge sign of long-term sustainability.
Then there is WorkPay, solving the administrative pain point of Pan-African expansion.
WorkPay evolved from a simple payroll tool to a full-stack HR, compliance, and employer of record platform. They serve over 1,000 businesses across more than 20 countries.
Why is this so critical?
They are enabling cross-border remote hiring. A company in South Africa can hire an engineer in Nigeria without needing a local legal entity there. They are building the indispensable labor and compliance rails for the AfCFTA to succeed.
We also have the enormous financial infrastructure players, Mkopia and Watu.
Mkopay achieved a huge milestone, reporting its first corporate profit in 2025, a swing from a $20 million loss to a $9.2 million gain.
Wow.
They anchor a vast fintech ecosystem for over 4.5 million Kenyan smartphone users and operate one of the continent's largest smartphone assembly facilities in Nairobi.
And Watu Credit is also growing rapidly.
Watu is targeting $340 million in revenue in 2026, driven by smartphone lending. And what truly signals the maturity of this model is its expansion beyond the continent.
They've gone where?
They've entered Latin America, launching in Mexico and Brazil, demonstrating that these African-developed fintech models are globally scalable solutions.
We also need to note the infrastructure being built around digital currencies, specifically Kotani Pay.
Kotani Pay is addressing accessibility. They've built infrastructure connecting blockchain wallets directly to local mobile money systems via USSD, the technology on feature phones.
So you don't need a smartphone or internet access.
Exactly. It facilitates cheaper remittances and gig worker pay across over 11 African countries.
Let's discuss climate, deep tech, and mobility. This is where Kenya is genuinely leapfrogging global peers.
Bossigo is a model of execution and mobility. They've transitioned from pilots to becoming a regional EV manufacturer, deploying over 70 electric buses.
And they have that pay-as-you-drive model.
Which removes the crippling upfront capital costs for bus operators. It's a sustainable model for urban transit decarbonization.
The real deep tech breakthrough, though, is Octavia Carbon. This puts Kenya on the global map.
This is truly astonishing. Octavia Carbon is deploying direct air capture, or DAC, technology. For you, the learner, think of it as a giant vacuum cleaner sucking co-euro directly out of the air.
And they're locating it where?
In the Rift Valley, using waste geothermal heat as the power source. This is essentially free energy.
Which means the cost is?
Radically cheaper. $100, $200 per ton of co-euro removal compared to the global average of $601,000. And the captured co-euro is permanently stored in local basalt rock.
So Kenya becomes the second country in the world, after Iceland, to do this at scale.
It's not just African growth, it's African global technological leadership.
The scale of renewable energy access is also growing, thanks to players like Sun King and Sun Culture.
King is now a vertically integrated powerhouse. They opened a massive manufacturing facility in Nairobi and recently secured a huge $156 million deal to finance 1.4 million more solar devices.
And Sun Culture is focusing on making farming resilient.
They pioneered Africa's first carbon credit ecosystem for solar irrigation pumps. By monetizing the carbon offsets, they can subsidize the pump prices by up to 40%.
Making them immediately cheaper than diesel.
Right. And they've also launched a parametric insurance product that uses satellite data to automatically pay out farmers during extreme weather.
Finally, let's look at agritech and logistics.
Apollo Agriculture supports over 350,000 farmers using AI and satellite imagery to tailor advice, credit, and insurance. The result is production that's reportedly 2.6 times the Kenyan average.
And LADA, tackling the perennial challenge of logistics.
LADA uses AI-driven route and load optimization across 7 markets. They help partners cut costs significantly, and beyond that, they're moving into embedded finance fuel cards, fleet asset financing, becoming a critical fintech infrastructure provider for supply chains.
While Kenya focuses on climate and consumer tech, Nigeria is staking a claim in a specialized field that directly addresses the security crisis we discussed earlier: defense technology.
This is perhaps the most strategic sign of self-determination this week. The Nigerian defense tech startup Terra Industries secured a substantial $11.75 million in funding, led by the major U.S. VC firm 8VC.
And their goal is explicit:
to build Africa's first defense prime contractor. They're focusing on multi-domain defense systems and autonomous tech to protect critical national infrastructure.
So it's about taking the defense of the continent into Africa's own hands.
Exactly. Reducing reliance on expensive, politically conditional foreign defense suppliers. This directly contrasts the $9 million lobbying effort by providing a technological, homegrown solution to the security deficit.
Let's take a necessary pause and reflect on the cultural and sporting events that captured attention this week, starting with the AFCON tournament in Morocco.
The biggest news was the immediate fallout from Burkina Faso's early elimination. After losing 3-0 to Côte d'Ivoire, the federation swiftly dismissed coach Brahma Traoré and his entire staff.
For failing to meet their target.
Failing to meet the semifinal target, it just highlights the high stakes of continental football.
In Central Africa, a major urban heritage project came to fruition in Kinshasa.
The historic market in Kinshasa is ready to reopen after a 5-year makeover. It's described as reflecting the soul of the city, and it's expected to serve up to 1 million shoppers a day.
And we noted a unique initiative aimed at diaspora engagement in Benin.
Benin launched the My Afro Origins citizenship program. It's designed to grant full citizenship to people of African descent globally who can prove ancestral ties.
Part of a broader effort to boost cultural tourism.
And strengthen historical connections related to the transatlantic slave trade.
Finally, the week included a sociological critique of a massive annual cultural event.
Yes, a discussion emerged around the dark side of Dedi December party season, popular across West Africa. The critique was that despite the huge influx of money, the locals don't really benefit in a sustainable way.
Raising questions about equitable economic growth.
Exactly.
Now let's tie all these threads together. The central analytical question of the week seems to be, how are security narratives weaponized, and what are the tangible consequences?
That tension between external description and local reality is the core conflict we have to analyze. The external description, particularly from certain political circles in the U.S., framed the Nigerian security crisis as a necessary intervention to protect innocent Christians.
A highly politically charged framing.
Which drives specific foreign policy and military responses.
And how does that compare to the on-the-ground reality?
The local reality is far more complex. Sources indicate the violence in northwestern Nigeria is driven primarily by organized criminal groups or bandits.
And their motivation is financial.
Chiefly financial gain, mass kidnappings, extortion. Researchers emphasize that the overwhelming majority of victims are Muslims from the same rural communities. To label the crisis solely as Christian genocide ignores the economic roots and the extensive Muslim suffering.
Right. And the most capable Islamic State affiliate, ISWAP, is in the northeast, not the northwest, where the recent U.S. strikes occurred.
A critical distinction.
Speaking of those strikes, the U.S. military action hit targets in Sokoto. What was the target, and how was the operation assessed?
The target was a known camp of the jihadist group Lakurawa in Tangaza district. Informants confirmed the strikes were devastatingly effective against the intended targets, killing an estimated 155 fighters.
It demonstrated a specific, high-precision capability.
One that Nigeria currently lacks.
But the operation was marred by catastrophic collateral consequences, which immediately fed into the negative narrative Nigeria is trying to counter.
That is the devastating blowback. Sources suggest that 4 out of 16 missiles reportedly fired appear to have missed their mark entirely.
Oh, wow.
Critically, 2 of these missed missiles reportedly hit residential buildings in north-central Kwara State, far from the intended target area.
Which fueled what on social media?
It fueled the dangerous narrative that the Muslim North itself was under attack, validating the external framing that the U.S. intervention was clumsy and politically motivated.
This external military action, despite its tactical success against Lakurawa, seems to set the stage for severe future instability.
It creates a predictable and dangerous cycle of reciprocal violence. Bandit leaders themselves have warned about it.
How so?
In response to the pressure, groups led by powerful figures like Dogo Guide are now acquiring improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. This signals an escalation from simple criminality to sophisticated counterattacks.
Which brings us back to that $9 million lobbying deal.
Exactly. The $9 million is a multi-million-dollar diplomatic effort to purchase control over that foreign narrative.
Because if that narrative is left unchallenged,
It risks further U.S. sanctions, cuts in military aid, or more politically clumsy military interventions. Nigeria is trying to buy back its political sovereignty by controlling its security story in Washington, D.C.
the weight of this analysis, the grim reality of conflict escalation, is perfectly encapsulated in the week's most telling quote.
It is. It came from a bandit leader speaking to the New Humanitarian after the Sokoto strikes. He said, "I swear to you, there will be uncontrolled tears among the people such that those who bomb us will be sorry for the civilians."
That statement is not merely a threat, it is a chilling promise of future violence. A brutal reminder that external military solutions, however targeted, almost always guarantee a cost borne by the most vulnerable populations.
It's a full stop on the analysis for the week.
We must now scan the horizon for events scheduled for the coming days that build on what we've discussed.
First and foremost, in Uganda, we have to expect the final election results, the official declaration, and the inevitable fallout legal challenges protests. That period will be volatile.
The African Union calendar is also busy.
The 51st Permanent Representatives Committee session began this week, preparing for the high-level meetings in Addis Ababa in February. The theme for the summit will focus on water resources, a topic made acutely relevant by the South African floods.
On the international front, there's a major U.S. immigration policy change coming into effect.
Starting January 21st, the U.S. pause on immigrant visa processing for 26 African countries, including Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Ghana, DRC, will begin for an indefinite period,
Subjecting citizens to new review processes.
and increasing uncertainty for millions.
And finally, a deadline related to that Moroccan trade policy.
The Moroccan ban on exports of frozen sardines, intended to protect domestic supply, officially takes effect on February 1st.
So we've covered a week defined by the race between structural advancement and acute volatility. We saw the push for continental integration, the AFRICA-FTA, the Pan-African tech platforms. But this was continuously overshadowed by major crises. A historic election marred by repression, a deadly climate disaster, and these complex, dangerous foreign policy maneuvers.
The major takeaway for you, the learner, is the dichotomy in resilience. Africa is defining its own future, particularly in tech and trade. The Kenyan startup ecosystem showed us companies moving from speculation to scale, building Africa's digital labor rails and pioneering global climate tech breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Yet external pressures from Gulf rivalries, contentious U.S. trade policy, or ill-defined military intervention continue to introduce acute volatility that threatens to derail these gains.
The resilience of the continent is therefore defined by its ability to pursue self-reliance, even when faced with these intense headwinds.
Exactly.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for the week.
This week's sources included political youth leaders in South Africa speaking openly of taking up arms to remove undocumented foreign nationals. This illustrates how quickly political rhetoric can bypass the ideals of Pan-Africanism and override shared history.
And the question that leaves us with is,
The question remains, can African governments move their energy and resources away from managing external narratives like that $9 million lobbying deal, and stop using volatile political rhetoric to solve their fundamental structural issues.
The issues of youth, unemployment, inequality, service delivery failures.
Those are the true drivers of domestic frustration and these dangerous security dynamics, making the scapegoating of migrants politically convenient. Until the focus shifts to delivering fundamental structural solutions, tactical diplomatic maneuvering and external interventions will remain the temporary and ultimately insufficient responses.
That structural solution, not the tactical deployment of PR or missiles, is the true deep dive awaiting the continent.